This is my question. Is that the first slide, Toby? Yeah, excellent. That's great. I totally remember writing it. So this is my question this evening. Can you stand? Odd question maybe, but can you stand? So, well, let's start that off. Can you stand? Yeah, come on, everybody. Excellent. You can stand. It's quite easy for some of you. We're going to keep standing. So we can all stand. Next question. Can you stand? Next slide, please, Toby. Can you stand on one leg? Can you stand on one leg? Can you stand on one leg and hold your arm out like this woman is doing? Excellent, pretty good. Can you hold that leg out and your arms up in the air? Can you do it closing your eyes? Can you stand for like 10 minutes like that, do you reckon?
No.
Reckon?
There's a lot of money for it.
Okay, Jonah. Okay, you can put your feet down now. Jonah, what was helpful? Okay, and what was helpful just then to you? Chair. So Jonah could stand, but he propped himself in the chair. Okay, now can you find one or two other people? So I'm just going to come over to Olivia and just put your hand on your shoulder. So hand on a shoulder. No, not all on Olivia's shoulders. Maybe put your hand on Sophie's. You put your hand on each of the shoulders. And could you just stand like that? You hold a leg up like that. Is it easier holding on to somebody else? Not like Jonah when he's pushing you off. Can you stand much easier now together? When you've got someone good to stand firm with, can you stand better together? Just about. Yeah? We're all a little bit exercised, that's good. The point of that, thank you boys, you may sit down. The point of that is just that actually we can stand firmer together. On your own, you're a bit wobbly, you need something like Jonah found just to prop you up, something to help you out. So we can stand firmer together. Next slide, please, Toby. Stand firm. These are words that come from the Bible. And they're written several times in the New Testament, and you can go home and have a look up and see how many times they're written in the New Testament. And I love these words. They're not big famous words or anything like that, but God says, stand firm. Paul, when he's writing his letters in the New Testament, he tells Christians, the early Christians, to stand firm. And there is a reason that we need to stand firm. So I know some of you have been baptized. Some of you have given your lives to Jesus. Some of you might be thinking about it. Some of you might not be sure yet. And we can give our lives to Jesus and we can choose to follow Jesus. And the songs that we were just singing, that Emma and Jonah led us beautifully in, we can sing these songs to Jesus. We can read our Bibles. And when things are going well, we can be faithful. But can we stand firm? Okay, can you give us the next slide, please, Toby? The Armour of God. This is something that you've probably heard about, and when you were little in Sunday club, you may well have done like things where you actually made a belt of truth, made a breastplate of righteousness, shoes of the gospel of peace, you had a shield of faith. Have you seen things like that before? Like people actually kind of dressing up? If you haven't done it, Carly, don't worry about it. This is in the book of Ephesians, and Paul is writing a letter, and he tells people to put on these things. Oh, thanks, Toby. And Paul writes the letter to the Ephesians and tells people to put on these things like armour. Now, there's a soldier there who might have been around that sort of time, the time just after Jesus had died and was risen again, the time of the Romans. There's a Roman soldier there. People would have seen Roman soldiers. That was quite an ordinary thing to see. And they saw them with their helmets on, with their swords, with their breastplates, the kind of like metal that they wore around here, with their sandals that they wore, swords, shields, the lot. It was something normal that people could see. And they wore that armour to protect themselves. To protect themselves from whom? Bad people. People who were not keen on the Romans, people who wanted to fight the Romans. And they wore that armour for protection. And you probably know from history that the Roman army was a pretty mean machine. The Roman army worked well, and apparently all men think about the Roman army every day. I don't know. Roman Empire, which, of course, the Roman army protected. So there we go. Now, armour has changed over years. People wear different kinds of armour nowadays, and those of you who do cadets, you know kind of things that you would use to protect yourselves nowadays in the army, things like that. The reason that Paul talked about this armour of God was the idea that actually we are in a battle. We need to protect ourselves with all of these things. So we need to make sure that we've got all of those things. And Paul was writing this letter and he said, once you've got all of those things, though, you've got to stand firm. There's no point in being a soldier in battle, wearing your helmet, having your breastplate, having your sword, your shield, being ready for the enemy to come at you, and then running away. There's no point if you can't actually stand firm against the enemy. Now, I've got a little clip to show you as well, a little bit about what it's like fighting in a battle. You can show the next, just click one, Toby. So this is a particular soldier that I'm rather keen on. A few weeks ago, Tom did, I'm trying to get Chris into this as well, for different reasons. Tom did a talk a few weeks ago all about Star Wars, which is one of Tom's favourite things to watch. And this is one of my favourite things to watch. This is a TV programme or like film series called Sharpe. And my dad used to watch it and I used to watch it with him and I love it. It's proper good swashbuckling stuff. So this takes place during the Napoleonic Wars when Napoleon was announced himself as Emperor of France. And the French were fighting the British, or the English rather at that time. Scots, Irish were involved, but in different ways, mainly in Spain. And this particular character, Richard Sharpe, is the hero of these stories, and he is teaching his men, his soldiers, how to fight. And the big thing that he says is they've got to be able to fire 3 rounds in a minute. So they have to get their gun, put their musket ball down, rip a case of powder, pour the powder down, ram it down with their bayonet, their ramrods, and then they've got to tap the ball into place and be ready to fire. And they fired in 2 rounds, very different from firing now. And they fired in 2 rounds. So the front row would fire, and then they would kneel down. They would kind of do all of this stuff, changing their bullets. They had another musket bullet. And while they were doing that, the back row would fire. And then the back row would sort their guns out while the front row stood up again and they fired again. And they had to keep doing that in their rows. And that is how they fought in those days. I've got a little video clip, which is this guy here in the TV show, Richard Sharpe, teaching his soldiers that it's no good if you can fire just 3 rounds a minute. You've got to be ready in another way as well. Can you try playing that video clip for me, please, Toby? Thank you.
Those men who fought in a big battle before. 1 pace forward. This place is called Talavera. There's going to be a battle here tomorrow. You'll fight in it, maybe even die in it. But you won't see it. There's a lot of smoke in a battle. Our cannon, their cannon. Our shot, their shell. Our volleys, their volleys. You don't see a battle. You hear it. Black powder blasting by the ton on all sides. Black smoke blinding you and choking you and making you vomit. And the French come out of the smoke. Not in a line, but in a column. And they march towards our thin line. Kettle drums hammering like hell, and a golden eagle blazing overhead. They march slowly, and it takes them a long time to reach you. And you can't see them in smoke, but you can hear the drums. And they march out of the smoke, and you fire a volley. And the front rank of the column falls, and the next rank steps over them with drums hammering. And the column smashes your line like a hammer breaking glass. And Napoleon has won another battle. But if you don't run, if you stand until you can smell the garlic, and fire volley after volley, 3 rounds a minute, then they slow down. They stop. And then they run away. All you've got to do is stand and fire 3 rounds a minute. Now, you and I know you can fire 3 rounds a minute. But can you stand?
And that's my question for you this evening. Can you stand? We're not fighting the French, not all the time. And we're not in the Napoleonic Wars, but we are in a battle. You put the next slide up, please, Toby. You are in a battle. You are in a battle constantly, daily, whether you know it or not. A battle of good versus evil, or of God versus the devil. And it's not something we talk about a great deal, but it is something that's constantly happening. And a little bit like that character there I was talking about, the French coming in a column. It's not always the French. The French coming in a column towards them and just keeping going. That's what happens to us with the enemy. And the closer we grow towards God, the deeper we know Jesus, the more of a threat we are to the enemy, and the more he's going to try and get to us and win us over. You might not notice it and you might not see it, a little bit like he was talking about, you don't see a battle, you hear it. It's around you, you smell it, it's just all over the place. And that's what happens in our lives at times when the devil is trying to get to us, or when evil is trying to get to us, when the wrong things are trying to get to us. It might look nice, it might look inviting. A lot of those guys would have joined up for the uniform, for the pay. They didn't realise what they were getting into. And what I want to encourage you this evening is to stand firm in your faith. Whatever faith you've got right now, whatever faith you are walking towards, whatever you are doing, you've got Jesus by your side. And you've got all those things that we looked at earlier in the armour of the Armour of God, and you can look that up in the Bible anytime. But it's the standing bit that's really important. It's no good if we go, Jesus, I love you and I want to follow you, and then the next day something happens, it gets a bit rough, and you run away. Or you go and do something different. Or you do something that you kind of like, oh, that wasn't what God wanted. Can I have the next slide, please, Toby? This is a painting by one of my favourite artists called John Martin, and it's called The End of the World. And it's just that kind of image of that battle. And I feel actually that's constantly what we're in. We are constantly in this battle for our souls. It doesn't feel like it day to day when you're maybe going to school or college, doing your homework, you're going to work, if you've got a job, things like that. It doesn't feel like there's a constant battle raging, but there is. Next slide, please, Toby. And I just want to leave you with reading these verses from Ephesians 6. And I just want you to notice, I put it in bold, but the number of times that the stand comes in. I want you to notice that. Can we read it together? Let's go. You ready? Put on the full armour of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, and we remember we've talked about this before, haven't we? When you see a therefore, think, what is the therefore there for? So you've got to do this because of that battle that we just talked about. Let's carry on, sorry. Therefore, put on the full armour of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled round your waist, with a breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the Lord's people. Thank you. Can you just pop it on the next slide, Toby? These verses are the ones that I really love, and this is why I'm talking about this to you this evening. Ephesians 6, verse 13, therefore, and this is Paul's ending of his whole letter. He's written a whole letter to all these new Christians and people who've been following Jesus. They're brand new Christians, they're just starting out, and he finishes his letter with this, therefore, put on the full armour of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you've done everything, to stand. Next slide, please, Toby. So I just want to leave you with that thought. Can you stand? Does your faith stand firm? When you're in this place on a Friday evening or in this place on a Sunday, is it great? But then when you head out into your week, can you stand firm in your faith? I don't mean you have to go out and go, I'm a Christian, I love Jesus, and I want you all to know. You can do that if you want, that's fab. But can you stand your ground? Can you stand in faith? Can you resist and ignore the temptations of this world? Next slide, please, Toby. I'm just going to leave you with that thought. Just stand firm in all that you do. Stand firm on all that you know from the Bible.